Welcome to Returning to Base, a Mechwarrior Living Legends podcast. Our topic today is maps and mapping. Now, you might ask, wasn't your mapping episode just a few episodes ago? Well, you'd be right. And the reason we're doing another one is because that episode was several years ago and a lot of things have changed. So my guests today are Ancient Demise, who will be joining us later, as well as Sabrist, who will also be joining us later, Rick Hunter.
Hello.
And Ivaan.
Hi.
And Fire Hound.
Hello.
And of course me, your host, Warlord Kentax. So I think I'll start today with Rick Hunter. So, what made you get into content creation for Mechwarrior Living Legends?
I think it started off with my interest in finding the best type of game environment for the player community, which is highly dependent on the type of maps that are being played, especially nowadays that the prevalent type of game is the terrain control. Some maps are very good, play very well, like Mirage, lovely map. And some maps, don't play too well because of the often the placement of the capture zones and general flow to and from the factories. Sometimes create bottlenecks and such. So I was wondering if we could somehow improve it so that people would get less frustrated with some of the less popular maps. And that was kind of my goal to give the community more maps to choose from that can be slightly better than the previous versions.
So in that regard, what sort of things have you made?
Well, I've only really touched on a couple of maps, like Desolation, TC Desolation. But that one was an interesting project because we don't have the sources anymore. And that means we can't actually edit it with the map editor. So Sabrist, he found a way to modify certain content in the maps via the XMLs that are part of the configuration of the maps, and where we could actually move cap zones and add content to the map as long as we stay on top of the terrain. So we can add features to it, but we can never go through the actual terrain. And Sabrist was patient enough and helped me figure out how to do it, and he's been paramount in the whole kind of map hacking.
Awesome. What other maps have you worked on besides Desolation?
The only other one that I've really worked on was Ancient Demise's Zodomir version 6. And that one we do have the sources for, and Ancient was kind enough to allow me to work on it, and I've been pretty much trying to improve the flow of the game of that certain map and give it a unique, more vertical component. So there's a lot more vertical play where players can get onto many more bridges and fire down at the enemy below. So that's a fun one.
So Fire Hound and Ivaan, have you had a chance to play that new version of Zodomir?
I don't think I had yet, but I'm really looking forward to try it.
I'm a great fan of Zodomir. Since the very beginning I saw that map, I always somehow saw the potential, but we were then back then quite a far way back from what that map can be. And thanks to recent efforts of Rick and Ancient and whoever was contributing to that map, it is achieving its full potential, and we are pretty close to it. And I still like it.
I also have to add that Ancient was asking feedback from some of the other veterans like Evan, 20K, and on version 6's construction and playability. So he's a real cool guy asking the veterans how a map might even get better from a player point of view as well.
I've noticed a much greater variety of assets being used in games now. For example, it used to be on Zodomir that eventually you just got to the point where there were a bunch of really heavy assault mechs walking around the map and dominating everywhere because the sight lines, as they were, made it so that big, brawly, stompy mechs were the cream of the crop when it comes to asset choice. And now you see lots of fast mediums to back cap. You see tanks driving around. There's, I'd say there is maybe not an increased amount of use of battle armor, but battle armor seem more balanced, I think, now on that map. They, because especially they can't buy ammo at the center base, and so they can't constantly restock their SRMs.
Yeah, that was an often, well, I wouldn't say abused tactic, but it was definitely a valid tactic, and it could have been tough going against some of the very experienced BA players like Saber 15 and such. They could pretty much tear your heavy mech apart with accurate.
All those SRMs, yeah. Also, I really like how the forward bases no longer produce assault mechs. That really helps balance things out, because you have to walk the assault mechs in from a little farther out. Thankfully, it's not quite like, say, Ivory Towers, where there's nowhere to repair the assault mechs except at main. In the case of Zodomir, you can repair them at any base but center base.
Yeah, exactly.
Also, I do know that sometimes Zodomir, even now, can get a little bit stompy, just like any map. And the forward, especially when the enemy takes your forward base, it becomes difficult to recover from that. But the opportunity to back cap the enemy's forward base is a lot more pronounced on Zodomir than on other maps. For example, on some other maps, sometimes you can't really find a good route to get to the enemy's base. But on Zodomir, you can just go all the way around the backside of the map, and it's not that far out of your way, as long as you're in a fast mech.
And that's one of the issues with the current version of Desolation is that the positioning of the forward bases are pretty well protected in a way, and it's hard to mount a successful back cap on them unless you go in with a couple of other teammates, and that's one of the limitations of the XML hacking is actually moving bases or anything that's within the terrain is almost impossible. So you can add content, but you can't actually move content very easily. So yeah, I'm just saying that backcap, the ability to backcap is highly dependent on the layout of the map.
Would it be possible to have a new hangar somewhere else?
No, adding spawn locations is incredibly difficult. We've already tried it in the past a little bit, Sabrist and I, but weren't very successful. It's still something that might be possible in the future with more testing, but the whole process of actually modifying part of the XMLs is a tedious process, because you have to pretty much guess where the pieces will go via the coordinates of the in-game coordinate system, and then you have to place it, and you have to size it properly, and each time you make a change, you have to exit the game, reload the server, reload the map, reload the client, and then see what your changes are like, and then repeat many, many times.
I would add one more thing, if I may. The second you have to modify the terrain to fit the spawn or the base, you are screwed in this method, right?
Yeah, you can't. You cannot modify the terrain. You can only add things on top of the terrain.
Sadly, outside of the editor, we can't touch the terrain still.
Yeah, I know. And you've already tried many times with the editing the height map, right?
I smashed my head on so many walls, and I don't have any walls to smash my head against. I'm running out.
Actually, it's quite amazing what you guys were able to do with this kind of editing, because the first time I saw this result of the XML editing in action was the new version for Urban Jungle, and
yes,
I was
Urban
like,
Jungle was the first one. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was quite surprised at how it is possible that now the bases are different, etc., etc. So I started to question that: do you guys actually get the cry files or the source file for Urban Jungle? Because I couldn't imagine any other way to edit that map. So it was pretty amazing, actually.
Yeah, it's quite something. I'm glad we have that possibility, and I know that Sabrist is actually working on some other maps. I think Ring of Fire he's working on.
Oh, good.
So there are most likely some positive changes coming to some of our existing maps, which will make them most probably play better.
Yeah, Ring of Fire is one of my favorite maps, but it's got no map boundaries. It's got no defense turrets. It's got misplaced or misaligned cap zones.
Several flaws, but genuinely, it's the single map that looks best in CryEngine.
I agree.
That does look good. Yep.
If only we ever could iron out the flaws.
Well, some of it can be done. Let's say, for example, I think the clan side has a few bumps in the runway for ASFs, and that runway is known to eat planes that take off and possibly land. And I believe he's actually making headway on that to fix that issue with the landing strip.
Excellent. I know that's one of the problems I've had with that map. I always have to take off a funny way to make sure I don't suddenly slam into the ground.
Yep, those are the frustrating things. And if we can get them fixed, then great. Actually, that touches on another topic of why I removed the ASF and the VTOL component in Desolation. It's not simply because I'd like to have just a ground-based battle, but mainly because sometimes the ASFs, when they would spawn, and the VTOLs, when they would spawn halfway in the actual ground. And if a player would jump into him, it would most probably insta-give them.
Yeah, that happened to me a couple times.
That was quite a frustrating thing, so I decided to remove it. And it's something that I still want to work on to see if we can somehow fix that. But yeah, that was mainly one of the main reasons why I removed the ASF and VTOLs on that map.
So what have you worked on most recently?
Just those two, really. I've touched at a couple of other maps just for testing purposes, but those are the only two ones.
Are there any particular map features that you'd like to point out? I know not necessarily that you've worked on, but that specific map features that you're particularly proud of. That, like, anybody has made.
User joined your channel.
All right. Let's see. What were you saying? Oh yeah, the some features of the maps. Oh geez. That's a tough one. I'd say it's more. Well, you always take a look at some of the most classic maps, like TC Mirage. Why does it play so well? The way it funnels the fight towards the midpoint, and how the midpoint is valued twice as much as the other cap points, and why that map has such a good playability and replayability. The way that it encourages team pushes and team retreats. People don't get lost very easily. I think that's looking at those classic maps should be a good starting point, or at least to borrow elements from, because we know that does work.
Yeah, like Death Valley is a very good example of that as well. And what was really unfortunate, of course, with Death Valley is that it's been around since, I don't know what version of Living Legends. It was out pretty early from the Wandering Samurai dev team. And the center base was highly weighted even back then, but there was no mention of it on the map or anywhere else to my knowledge. And so the enhanced ticket bleed from capturing it was only discovered by people playing it or by hearing it from devs. And so just random pub players like I was at the time had no idea that it was actually something that mattered.
Oh yeah, very much so. And I think most of the maps nowadays have labels on the map when you bring up the map via the M button, and it tells you exactly what the cap values are.
Yeah.
In all honesty, the whole cap system, the way that it displays, would it be even better if MWL will actually show you the rate of ticket loss versus simply the number of map points held, because then you wouldn't actually have to do the calculation in your mind. Okay, if we here hold this map and this map is valued at 1.25 and the other map is valued at 0.5, what is going to be our overall ticket drain?
Could just do a blue-red slider bar.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's something that's possibly in the pipeline for MWL, but that would be definitely easier for people to understand what's happening with the tickets.
Depends on how advanced we can get with the UI.
Yeah, that's always the difficulty.
Ticket tracking overall will be very welcome addition to what we already have, like on the scoreboard or somewhere else.
Definitely. Oh yeah, so, welcome, Ancient Demise.
I guess.
Okay, and Rick Hunter, do you have any other plans for the future when it comes to map making?
I'm certain there are plenty of maps that we can always work on. Some being, of course, they would only require or only could be map edited via the XML edits, which, of course, like I mentioned, take a long time to do, and there's only so many things you can do with it. But none in the pipeline, really. In all honesty, I still want to improve Desolation a bit, especially the F6 cap point, which is the one in the mountains, the one that's sitting on top of the mountains. It has that snowman on top of it. I think it's still too far away from the from the general fight at mid. middle of the map. So I'd love to closer, but it's one of those things where you're limited on what you can do and how you can place the pieces, and on this XML editing method is limited, and you only can put things on top of the existing terrain. So if I would want to bring that closer, I would have to put a whole bunch of other pieces on top of the closer peak towards the middle of the mountain, and to the middle of the map. And it's difficult to do that. And then, of course, to make sure that all assets can get there properly, that the ramps are not too steep, and that it doesn't look too janky. It's really difficult to do it. So
I remember you telling me just how, like you said, tedious earlier, and I don't think that even comes close to describing the level of tedium that because the first time you told me, right before the first public release of Desolation, that you had done over 300 individual builds of that level, and had to load it up again on the server, test it out. Oop, didn't work. Then you have to go back, fix it, put it together again, load it back on the server again, test it again.
And in all honesty, anybody can do it. The way that we can do these edits, it's relatively straightforward. It's just like you mentioned, it's a tedious way to do it. But anybody can do it, and if anybody wants to do it, ping me in Discord, and I'll run you through it. And it's once you know how to do it, it's straightforward.
You heard it here, folks. Everybody, ping Rick Hunter.
Yeah, it's true. I can technically put a huge wiki article on that, and with examples and such. That's actually not a bad idea, Fire. That's something. Okay, that's something that I'll work on in the future. Good idea.
Probably I will stay in editing the source file within the actual editor.
Oh, yeah, trust me. If you have the source, I'd rather do that.
Yeah, of course. I'm just joking, of course.
All right. So I think I'll move on to Ivaan.
Oh, Jesus. Okay. So I think we briefly touched this. That how did I start in this whole mapping topic for MVLL? So I will try to be brief here. So I just really liked the game when it released, and shortly after I started to make maps for it, because I was sort of interested in this creative, process, and releasing something which others can play on, etc. So I find it always interesting. And here we are, I don't know, 10 years later, still doing this. So it's interesting, definitely.
Thank you for your contributions.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
No worries.
And so, this is a pretty long list. What have you made?
Maybe, lots of things. The most recent ones are these server-side time of day support for certain maps. And just this update was just released recently, I think in the 13.1 version. And I recently worked on this. In the past 1 or 2 years, I was not really available all the times for the mapping team, so I was not active recently as much as I was before. But here I wanted to do these things, so I made some quick adjustments for some of the maps, and I'm happy that they could be released.
With the time of day settings, is it just the time of day, or does it control more in the map?
Yeah, it controls more. Actually, so we knew it was possible always, because other mappers or maps were doing that in the past. So Ancient here is always doing like a proper time of day setup for his maps, I believe. And even if you look at Extremity, which was released, I think, within the first version of the game, then it has all sort of, time of day settings with various effects. So the changing the time doesn't just control the, if it's nighttime or a daytime, but it can control certain effects, like whatever you can imagine basically within the engine. And I was never really experimented with these settings because, I don't know, it was not really so widespread to have maps which have these features, so I was always satisfied with sort of a static time. But when the team actually, I think maybe Star Chart did this I'm not sure about it, but it could be him who did this setting for the server that it is now possible to change the time of day for the map from the actual server console. And I knew that my maps are not suitable for this, so I was a bit afraid that what could happen. So this is why I started to think about it, that how can I improve my maps to support this feature.
I had a lot of fun playing the foggy version of Wildlands.
Yeah, so it's not just controls the actual day and night, but as you mentioned, it has some extra effects like increasing fog, maybe some other weather effects such as like haze or rain or sandstorms and very low visibility and things like that. So I was trying to play with these settings a bit, that each of these maps have basically like 4 settings. The first one is the default, then you can have some clear nights at 1 a.m. and some weather effects at 5 p.m. and some night time plus weather effects at 11 p.m. So essentially you get like 4 different versions, which is cool, I think.
I know I played Thunder Rift recently, and it was nighttime. That was an interesting change.
Yeah, I think that a lot of the actually older maps in the game are supporting the different time day settings. However, I think we will need to do a pass on them, because I checked a few just out of curiosity, and I saw that partially they are set up like, I don't know, from 7 in the morning to maybe afternoon, but after that they are sort of switching back to sort of the default Crysis settings, this normal Earth-like day and night setup. So it can look very weird on some of the maps. But generally, they do support this dynamic time of days. I think most of them do. Actually, just we need to make sure that it is not looking weird.
Yeah, this is something that we take care of. Like you mentioned, we just take a look at every map and see what time of day does work and what doesn't work with that certain map. And on the server side, we can pretty much say, okay.
There is one thing. There is one thing with time of day. I was not very familiar with the editor and mapping in the whole, but what I have noticed is that the exact time of day has a big role in baking the textures and the somehow shades over all textures in a level. And when the time of day is changed too much in the hue or in the brightness or anything like that, it happens that the textures became way off, and it looks very strange.
Yeah, it's actually a setting in the editor which you can calculate the textures based on the time of day, the current time of day, as you know.
Yeah, something like that. It is bound in a weird way, and it's not too obvious when one encounters it. And only later it has become clear to me what happens. I had like purple grass and yellowish sunset something.
Yeah, it can be very weird. So one thing is the textures, and then one other trick is what I usually use is that playing with the light, the lighting and the color of the lighting. So it can also change the look of the map very dramatically. And if the time of day is changed, then the whole look and feel of the map will be different. So there are multiple things to influence the look of the map.
True. And the most annoying thing to me is that the editor does not save the settings, or at least not for me. I always have to edit them by hand in a text file.
I believe you have to click the record button, then you can drag the sliders around.
Correct.
I supposed I was missing something, but I will try next.
Yeah.
Ivaan, what sort of map features out there do you find the most interesting?
Features in terms of like effects or rather gameplay or?
Well, whatever you like.
Probably I think I would go with gameplay, so I like that when a map is sort of plays well, so I think this is the most rewarding thing, I guess. So this is what I'm always trying to aim for, not always succeeding, but at least I try. So if a gameplay is good, there is good back and forth on the map, close matches, I think those are the things which I like the most.
Certainly, I enjoy close matches, even when I lose.
Right.
Do you have, beyond this, the time of day settings, do you have any other future plans for maps?
Yeah, actually, so there is always this talk about marshes, TC marshes and TC Enceladus, that they are too big and sort of a walking simulator and so on and so forth. So probably we should take a look at that. We already talked about it, I think, with Sabrist. One of us will do it, probably. Doesn't really matter. I can do it, he can do it probably. So I think
the cry files right for that.
Yeah, of course. So it's totally accessible. We have the source files for it. So, and actually, I think it would be pretty easy to change them and even spice up the gameplay a bit on them to move the bases closer, etc., etc. So we could sort of get those maps back into the rotation. Another, I think, playing point is Altai, so TC Altai, which is a very beautiful map, but unfortunately it's very rarely on the servers because it has also gameplay issues. I tried to do pass on it once already, but didn't really work out, so maybe we should give it another chance.
Yeah,
and then... Yeah, go on, sorry.
The mountain layout on it is kind of restricted. It's restrictive in what we cannot do for gameplay. It's the Desolations limitation, but luckily we do have the source files to
we have the source
work on it. But yeah, it is a beautiful map. If we could get that tweaked a little bit, that'd be lovely.
I love how it looks underwater when with all the coral.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it looks really nice. This is why I would be glad to save it or make it great again. to actually show this, that we have this map laying around which nobody plays on, and it would be great to have some matches on that. And then we have an unfinished map, I think. I think it's Canyon or something like that. It's an interesting design. I think it's sitting like 70% in terms of completion. So I think it can be finished relatively soon. And the final thing I want to do is maybe bring in CityTech as an official map, because I made it as a community map, and I still have, I think, the sources for it.
Oh, that'd be great. Because that's a fun map to play. I mean, it works best with lots of people because of some of the a little bit further apart. But once you have a good full population server, the brawls in it are epic.
Yeah, the problem is with that map is that I don't really like the buildings on it, because the buildings what we have, for example, on outskirts, like or even stone rows, they are much nicer and less performance intensive or less resource intensive. And what I have on CityTech is pretty much like not really well optimized. So I would like to replace those buildings with a nicer models, which are doesn't require as much computing power and so on and so forth. So it will be a great update, I think.
I know one thing with CityTech, which I love CityTech. It's a great map. One thing I think it could maybe use is I have a hard time finding the repair bay and the hangar. Even though you've marked it on the map, I still have a hard time finding the repair bays in the factories. So many buildings.
Yeah. So
We need big "We are hidden here" signs.
probably those can be added, right?
It would be a great big billboard on top that advertises some unit or something, like all those old maps. You know, they'll have like a billboard with an advertisement for a unit, and you put that on top of each repair bay and factory, and that way it might be able to use it as a way to guide people to those locations.
Right, I think it might be possible. And the last thing is what Rick just mentioned before, that they should check the time of day settings for all the official maps, and if we see something which is not great, then we can try to fix it, because I think we have the sources for all the official maps, so it's not an issue to correct them.
A while back said that I was going to go around and test out the base lambs relative to base runways, since I really don't like getting bombed while on the runway. And there's a few maps where it can be done. For example, Frostbite right now, only the inner sphere runway is vulnerable to being bombed, whereas the clan runway has enough laser anti-missile systems in the right position. So even though there's the same number of laser anti-missile systems between the runway on either side of the map, the positioning of them in Frostbite on the inner sphere runway allows for the inner sphere runway to get bombed.
I was not aware. Maybe we can put this on the list to fix.
Actually, in the most recent update, they've increased the base defenses, and especially the against air targets. So that may have changed a little bit. I think you might have to take another run at that.
Yeah, even if the base lambs still allow for bombing of the runway, the increased base defenses might just scare those bombers away in the first place. Well, still won't stop the high altitude bombing, but that's not typical. So I already asked about future plans. So, Fire Hound, do you feel ready to answer those questions?
I can try.
Cool.
I guess what made me to create content for MVLL is, in the first place, I felt it was lacking. In the first place, we were direly lacking documentation. Like, our wiki was in sort of a transition between starting and actually existing like it is today. And mostly for the content creators, it was lacking any consistent information. It was a few, maybe 5 articles, but they never led to a complete, for instance, level or a map that one could read the articles or fall back to them to reference a certain issue or thing or something, and to create a successful, at least working map. It was just starting, and no one could actually get there. And I know this because I tried. And the first hump I encountered was the documentation. And then, after that, we were then, like we are today, lacking the assets like buildings, destroyed buildings, new buildings, the dropships, notorious lack of dropships, and destructible trees and light posts, for instance. After that, meanwhile, while trying to tackle each problem I encountered, I also have started learning things, and one of the things that was most painstakingly to learn was the performance issue. One cannot simply put some 3D object in the engine, import it, and expect it to work well. One has to optimize it, and that's a lot of time to figure out and to create or establish a workflow that can be documented, and I try to put it on Wiki, but as I'm not a native English speaker, that is only halfway done. The bulk of information is about there, but it has to be sorted through by some native speaking English editor that make sense, so other people can figure it out what I actually wanted to say there.
Yeah, thank you. I really like those the documents, and not that I have been able to make much use of them since I'm not a map maker, but I think they're really helpful.
Yeah, they've been helpful for me. I mean, I'm still very much of a beginner map maker, and I haven't even really touched terrain editing. So, but I was definitely scrolling through the.
Kindly thanks for the feedback.
Oh no, it's very useful. It's that and actually Ancient, you created a wonderful 3-hour video explaining the beginning and basically making a map from scratch and going through all the parts, and that also was very helpful.
Glad that could be helpful without me having to edit it.
No, it was excellent. It was I just kept on going back to certain parts and familiarizing myself with it to help demystify the map editor. And of course, I asked a lot of people, you guys involved, how to do certain things, and when you run into certain problems, how to get around them. So it's good to have that resource.
A map from scratch is still way over my head. I'm still struggling with editing existing maps and with producing proper content, but possibly with tools and suits that are legally available for free, and that one can legally produce content without loyalties or anything due to the parties that provided the tools. Namely, one of the things that bothered me most was that most of our content is ownership-wise somewhere in the gray area. We cannot say for each and every asset in the game, it was produced by this and this person, and he has the full right to it. And that bothered me the most. That's why I tried to establish the workflow and the work pipe through as much as possible free to use tools and free to use royalty free. That's one of the issues I was trying to address with using the notorious Blender everyone knows about, but tries not to use it because it's some to start to begin with. That was one of my primary concerns, that we are entitled to the ownership of the content that we create for this or any other game or in general.
So what's like the most recent 3D model you've worked on?
The most recently added model to the game was the Conquistador if that's the right way to pronounce it. It's the great dropship we didn't see featured on any map yet, except that of a Volkodav. It is an early release, alpha testing stage something, and it's the only map that features it this far. And from the other officially supported maps, the most recent featured 3D model is the Vanir or somehow. It's the clan Ghost Beer dropship that is on the Stone Rose map, that is on the clan side in the inside the fortress on the clan side, the main span.
Nice. I really like seeing
Meanwhile,
those dropships in the game.
I tried hard to make them to be worthwhile seeing. Thank you for the compliment. And one of the things we figured out somewhat late in the development of that model is it is too heavy armed that it ever can be used in its full arms complement in any map of our mod. It simply has too much firepower to stand on the ground, and even for the main base.
Did you also make the dropship that's crashed on Scorched?
On Scorched, we have two dropships actually.
He means the warship.
Scout. Yes, I was getting to that. We have two scout dropships, a light class, and one of them was kindly textured recently by a professional texturer that I understand is now working with Nene in some not to disclosed yet project. They have a collaboration. I hope they succeed in it, whatever they do. And that dropship is the Broadsword. The other dropship is the ancient Aurora, but that is known from earlier maps, I think. Zuid had it featured first, not in a working version, but just as a just on the rooftops in the middle. And in the middle, the crushed one is a warship. It's an actual warship, and it's from Star League era. I have studied so much homework about it to make it look like a real thing, and I hope I succeeded.
It's an Aegis heavy cruiser.
They look cool, by the way. I like these new dropship models what we have.
That final look is due to Ancient Demise working on the textures to the last minute for the release. I had made some approximate texturing just to set the UVs right, and the final textures were placed by him.
Don't blame me for it. I just hacked it together.
Yes, we had also issues going through and things like that.
Do you have any plans for the future with creating content for Mechwarrior Living Legends?
Well, I was hoping, and I'm still not totally giving up, to produce the ever needed, direly destructible light post that eludes us all this time, and the destructible tree that we lack. It has to be both destructible and not to burden the engine, possibly at all, so it can be used in great amounts. The light post, we were really close a year and a half back, but I had a hard disk crash, and since then I somehow switched to lazy mode and didn't work too much in that regard anymore. And more recently I have started a 3D model of a mobile fortress, a World of Blake thing, and I got a decent amount of publicity and feedback on it across forums and Discord, and I was hoping if I could somehow cram it into a MVLL map someday, but that is still somewhat in the future.
Well, thank you very much for all of that input.
You're welcome.
Okay, so we also have Ancient Demise. So what made you get into content creation for Mechwarrior Living Legends?
It's been a long time. I'm not really sure at this point. There wasn't a lot done at the time. I don't remember who started it first, but between me, Coffinell, and Duff, all started working on maps around the same time and kind of helped each other get started. This was back in 2011, I think.
What things have you made for the game?
Bunch of unnamed now community maps, and then made several official maps. One of them, Ivaan helped me turn from a community map into an official project after the shutdown, and that's Harvest. What else did I make after that? Just trying to remember them all. Most recently, I've made Jihad, Scorched, and Coliseum.
Cool. I've been having a lot of fun with Scorched, especially exploring the various heat conditions over the map, like how, sure, jumping in the molten lead heats up my mech, but the conductivity is so high that I can actually fire my weapons pretty frequently, better than I could if I was out of the lead.
Rapidly, but not all at once.
Right.
Yeah, I made that so people would have to approach everything a little bit differently, which some people like and some people really don't.
I think that's great, and the different conductivity and heat levels available on Scorched, that also adds another dimension to the map. I believe it's at the middle part of the map where it's the higher you go, the less hot it gets.
Yeah, it's uniform. I think there's 4 or 5 levels of heat and conductivity. Took a little bit of work to get working properly with some flow graphs, but as long as you don't change them too rapidly, it works pretty well.
Yeah, no, it adds a nice dimension to the map that unfortunately not everybody knows about, and I kind of put that in the map hits on the server, but not everybody reads that either. So
Yeah, even if you put it right in their face when they spawn, they're not going to read it half the time.
Everyone loves the debug gun on Scorched.
It needs to be removed, honestly.
It was a mistake.
Mistakes happen.
So, you mentioned Harvest. And one of the complaints, since, I should be a conduit for the community, right, that I heard is they would like fewer lag cabbages. They have some people in the community, some players have been having a drop in frame rate when they get near the cabbages.
If someone could make a plowed field texture, we could replace all the decals we have there, and that would save a lot. It's not the cabbages themselves that are causing the problem. It's the texturing that we had to do to make it look like a plowed field.
Huh. Interesting. And one thing I did have to say, because one of the big features of the last podcast that you and Ivaan were here for was TC Palisades. And what's really sad is not only is it almost never played, I've never played it yet. Not even once. And I'm really sad about that, because I want to play it.
It seems like that map is hit or miss with people and how they play. I think a lot of people just like to push the center and stake around there instead of walking all the way around in smaller groups, which appears to be the much more effective strategy on that map. If it's played right by the right teams, it can be very fun. You can be in engagement in the middle and then completely get flanked by, I think I played it once and there was 2 demolishers came down the road from the side and blindsided everyone.
It might get some complaints, but Rick Hunter, would you put it in the rotation for us so we could see it again a little more frequently?
If I may suggest something about the Palisades TC version, in my opinion, the map offers too many options for the average guy, for the public gamer. Maybe produce 1 or 2 versions that has different areas as playable, and just reduce the options on half or 1/3 of the options to use the map. I think the usual common player gets confused by the options. I found myself just raiding the map, seeking action that seemed to happen always behind the hill.
Oh, so even though the enemies were close and your ally was close, they were actually very far away due to the different routes through the map. Is that what you're saying?
Kind of that.
I would like to put it back onto the rotation, but unfortunately, it did get some criticism. I think it's not just the map routing, but it requires pretty much a full server for it to be really to play very well. Anything less than that, it becomes pockets of battles, and the time traveled is often pretty high. So it makes it.
I say we just split the play area and produce 2 or 3 variants of the same map. That
we could figure that out without having to make separate files.
Yeah,
that would be ideal.
Hey, and actually, that's a good question. Can one set different out of bounds areas depending on
some server setting?
If you can figure out how to activate or deactivate them, and activate or deactivate spawn areas too.
Yes. Huh. That's something to look at.
Sounds like a feature request.
I think maybe we can try to experiment with time of day setting as well.
I think one of the first things to do would be cut off half the map. So keep the bridge and keep one half of the side base or side factories. It'll make it a little bit asymmetrical, but it might shrink the area enough.
It's just my gut feeling that the map has enough content that it could work in 2 or 3 versions that would feature only part of the whole thing and still be interesting for most public gamers.
So you're saying that like even if we had to have multiple copies in the files, we could have like Palisades West, Palisades East, and Palisades North.
And Palisades Part 2.
Or something like that, yeah.
Like sequels.
So yeah, also what Ivaan was saying about possibly being able to link that to time of day, if that feature could ever be implemented, that'd be really cool because you could actually change what zones are capturable on a regular map. Imagine bogs, like with a few, even some more cap points, but over the course of the match, that some of the cap points stopped working or something. But that would be really hard with the, what do you call that, the minimap, I think. It would be probably...
The minimap you could swap out with a different file, or maybe...
There is a command for the minimap in original Crysis, I think.
Oh.
Yeah, I remember hearing something about this. Go ahead.
It's not in the flow graphs, but I think someone in the modding forum mentioned in the C++ code it can be ordered to be swapped.
So I think they did something like that in a single player.
I think so.
Yeah, it would just be awesome to be able to move capture zones around during the course of a match. It would force players to actually, explore the entire map and not just stick to the same play mode.
So I've tried a little bit to get into making that dynamic, the out of bounds and spawn areas, but there's a lot of limitation with the flow graphs. We need someone from the C++ side to edit what's available in the flow graph part of the map, and then we could make these dynamic changes.
I was very excited once I learned that the factories can be moved while the game is running on the server. I have experimented for a while with dropships as factories, as actual factories, like to have a dropship land on a spot, and that you can spawn and build there, and once it is finished, that it dusts off, and that you can't no more build there on the spot. And I have managed on a trial map, I repurposed the Kandahar map from the late DAF, and I have tried on the release 9, and I managed to have a dropship get down, enable a factory, and to spawn assets and to build and everything, and to dust off. And once he lands again, even the factory can change sites, can change teams. What I did not manage and did not figure it out is why the turrets didn't swap the teams as they showed. And since then I have tried to understand the turret code, but I still am not certain how to make one turret change teams with a movable factory. With a fixed factory it can be managed, but as soon as you move the factory, something is off, and I did not figure it out completely. But on the other side, the factory can be made to move across the minimap, and it registers, and the game renders it on the minimap as in motion. And I was very excited to find it out.
That is pretty cool. Wow.
Totally.
I think ultimately it may have to be someone else that does Palisades every time I edit that map. Something with a basis in my computer corrupts. It's never the same twice.
Yeah, actually, when Fire mentioned the moving factories, I had some really bad memories about it as well. When the factories stopped working on or spawning different assets in different places, and all the synchronization questions between the players who are just joining and who are in the game still sees the beginning of the game, so etc. etc. It brings up a lot of
synchronization is a big issue.
I think that's an issue. The spawning is an issue on Scorched even. I think VTOLs spawn in the aerospace base, but the VTOL factory, that whole thing is a prefab from the library. So that's unchanged on every map, but somehow it's just different.
With the prefabs, I have the normal prefabs and it is working and fine, so everything is spawning in the right place. And as soon as I extract the prefab, so remove the objects from the prefab and try to add something to it or move them or whatever, the whole thing just breaks, and all I do is just export. So
solids alone have big issues with the engine. And I read somewhere in the forums with official support that the mappers are advised to use solids sparingly, like few dozens at most in one place. And we know our prefabs are loaded with solids, tens of thousands.
Correct. So never use too much prefabs.
Also, the moving factory that I used didn't have movable areas. Only the factory alone, the entity, was movable and shown on the minimap. The trick was that the areas didn't move really; they just were disabled for the transition. And the factory
your channel.
The factory was merely enabled and disabled, so it was not noticeable that the actual spawning areas were immovable and always in a fixed place.
Yeah, it's pain in the ass.
Well, hello, Sabrist, or Sabrist. Well, which way is your preferred pronunciation?
Both is fine. Howdy.
Hey,
Hi.
Glad to see you make it.
Yeah, I'm glad you could make it too.
yeah, we just decided that you're going to be fixing Palisades.
Oh, that's great. Thanks for that.
How did you get into making content for Mechwarrior Living Legends?
By accident, I guess. The map making thing started with our wiki project with maps, and it led into the what we call XML hacking project. It was pretty different approach to the map making.
Yeah, Rick Hunter covered a bunch of that. Rick, were there any subjects related to that you think Sabrist could cover as well?
Oh, I don't know. Well, Sabrist, you kind of figured that out all on your own with Urban Jungle and changed the way the map plays quite a bit. And well, maybe you can go into some high-level explanation on how that all works with map editing or the XML editing, or I don't know how detailed we want to get into this.
Yeah, it might not be necessary for that.
I'm so bad at explaining that stuff. It would make no sense.
It was.
But yeah, I just was a bit curious what one could do just by changing the XML by text editor. Very simple, and it led to things that was surprising that it didn't break the game.
Thank you for saving some of our cool maps that were virtually unplayable and are now playable.
Well, you're welcome. But I was just surprised that no one had figured that out before. Because it's quite simple, actually.
Okay, so what maps have you made, or assets of any kind that you've made for Living Legends?
Well, all my makings are some kind of remakes or just tweaks on old maps. But the Series 5 map is most of my work. It's based on the Lunacy map. The terrain is mostly same, which is Finalizer's map. He gave me the source, thanks for him, to use it as I like, and yeah, the Series 5 is my first one, and currently maybe only.
I was sad to see the tunnels go, but it's so much more playable now. I really appreciate it. That map's pretty darn fun.
Yeah, the first thing I did was remove those tunnels. I don't like them, and they cause some issues with the map.
I'm not surprised that they cause issues. Let's see. And so that basically also covers what you worked on most recently. Do you have any future plans for Living Legends?
I always have some plans. I'm actually working on Ring of Fire at the moment, making some base turrets and trying to cover some mech traps that's on the map.
Did you get the source for that?
Nope. It's the XML hacking.
Oh, nice.
So can you actually edit the terrain of the map without the source file?
No. You have to use all kinds of dirty tricks to cover stuff.
Okay.
Fill it with concrete.
Snowmans.
Oh yeah, the rig special.
We depend on the supply of snowmans.
Not just limited to things that you've contributed, but what sort of map features have you thought were like really interesting or awesome in Mechwarrior Living Legends maps?
Of course, the extremity features, they're so complex. If you look at the editor, all the stuff that's been made, it's amazing. It's so cool.
Yeah, I'll second that. It's something else.
I know about like the whole rotating skybox. What else is like cool with extremity?
How the change of the night and day cycle happens and doesn't break the game actually. It just functions, and how the water freezes and all that stuff that happens between the cycles. It's pretty amazing.
Oh yeah, I've seen that water freeze, and it's rather surprising how infrequently I'll see someone actually get stuck in the ice. Like if they do, it usually is only until the ice finishes freezing, and then they're back up on top of the ice and they're able to move again. It's only like during the freezing process that they might get a little bit stuck. When they get stuck under the ice, that doesn't happen too often. So, and it's a really awesome feature, being able to drive on top of a surface that was formerly where you would have fallen into the water.
Yeah, well, desync can still make some magic happen, but otherwise it should work properly.
Man, I don't know what it is about my computer or my build. I don't know what it is, but I haven't had but a few desync issues for I don't know how long. I always hear people, like every time I play on Thunder Rift, I'll hear someone say that they fell through the floor, and I haven't fallen through the floor on Thunder Rift maybe in a year. I don't know. And I play this game a lot.
Because we actually had to make some fixes to be able to avoid that, because holes and tunnels, as were already mentioned by Sabrist, they are pretty tricky things in the game. So you have to basically build a good foundation, so to speak, under every object which is sort of in this hole or underground, to prevent basically fall throughs in case of desync. So actually there are huge concrete blocks behind or beneath each of the mech factories which are underground on any maps, and I put them there to prevent the desync fall through issue. And hopefully they work. Sometimes they can be still, bypass some heavy desyncs, I guess, but like 95% of the times, I think they are saving people, actually. I hope.
Solids are treacherous.
Exactly. And this is why I used these brush concrete objects, and those are basically beneath all of the underground factories.
I was told that in the beginning the idea was just like Crysis, that the spawning of the assets is hidden from the player and from the world by enclosure. And just like VTOLs up to this day, it was the idea for them to spawn hidden and then to be raised, like the VTOLs today, in elevators in the main mech bay, and so forth. But what happened in actuality is that somehow they decided it's broken. They didn't have time to fix it, or plan it to, but never get to it. and they just cut off all the mechanics, all the elevators and everything, and just made the factories without them. But all the old maps still had provision for that to happen by being hollow beneath the maps. And some maps had literal holes in terrain, and the others had just depressed holes beneath the spawn points. And that was the main cause that there was this possibility when one spawns to fall through, because something was off in the model or something like that.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. They probably didn't want to see the spawning happen, so it happens where you can see, like the VTOL factory.
In Crysis, it not only is hidden, but if the player manages to get inside the room where the spawning happens, the factory is killing each entity inside the area of spawning, so the spawning happens without witnesses. That's why we have the killing blow in the factory entity. Yes, it's obviously the means to clear the area so no one can witness the appearing in thin air. It's furthering game immersion, sort of.
So Sabrist, what did you change about TC Extremity, or well, I guess it was TSA Extremity when you got your hands on it?
The plan was to change as little as possible, and the first plan was to actually make it like a single cap map, and it actually was like that because we don't have quite many of those. Only Forsaken is the only one that we have currently. So plan was to have that kind of map, but after playing it a while, I decided to add 2 caps for it because it didn't play as well as I thought. And of course, the flying objects were removed. There's no ASF and VTOL for it because it was meant to be like the Forsaken. Like what we call it, King of the Hill.
I know there's Acid King of the Hill as well, but is Forsaken's official, right?
Yes.
Yep. Is it called the map called? You remember, guys, the small map with the hill in mid of it?
Yeah,
it's the only map where you can take the red camo and be hidden.
Yeah, and also what's the Ivan's map? Fleetstone. What's it called?
Yes, it is the other red map.
Yes.
Flagaton, yeah, right. But it's a big TC map, so. But yeah, red coral goes well on that map as well.
Didn't you say that map is actually green the ground,
Yeah,
but
actually it is. It's just a visual trick with the that it is reddish, but the actual texture is still basically the original green color, but you cannot see it because of the lighting.
Yeah, the time of day control that you have over a map's look is really substantial. It's actually a huge part of the look of the map.
Exactly.
And to my surprise, back then it is pre-baked. Like only minor part of the lighting is dynamic, and much of the color is baked when the map is produced and exported.
Texturing. Painting by hand, painstakingly. It's a pain in the ass, and if you can autofill it, it looks like crap.
Right, and then there is, for me, is the crashes within the editor and the map corruption, which is otherwise known as the view distance or LOD or visual bug, what we had in old TSA Mirage, I guess. So those things can happen, and they are extremely annoying. So I have to keep like 20 like working version of the same map during the time when I work on the map to avoid those things, and actually to be able to go back to a working version if I see something is messed up, because those things cannot be fixed after they happen. So if you have a map corruption, then you're basically just had to start over.
And you don't actually know until you actually load it into the game, because the game check mode in the map editor doesn't necessarily catch those problems.
Yeah, there is a useful command for that. It's something like an occlusion command or something like that, which can sometimes help. But as you said, sometimes you see something which is already happened and in the game already, and as I said, it cannot be fixed.
Yep.
I know I'm breaking off the topic for a second, but Sabrist, thank you so much for fixing Extremity, because even though there's still plenty of players out there that complain, and they're going to complain regardless, I really do enjoy playing Train Control on there, even when it's a stomp. It's such an interesting map to play on.
Yeah.
Thanks
You're
for
welcome.
Thanks for resurrecting it.
Like it.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I mean, the thing is that because of the visual, I wouldn't say difficulty, but the light change.
Challenging.
Yeah, it is a little bit more challenging for new players to play on, and if you don't know the map flow, and then you don't know what you're looking for exactly, you can get hit a few times before you realize where it's coming from. But that applies to any low visibility map, and I think a lot of low visibility maps get a lot of hate because of that. General frustration of players not knowing where they're getting hit from, and then already they've lost an arm, and it can be frustrating, but that's just, we can't have all, super visibility maps, and I like the dynamicness, and the low visibility maps is great, and with the time of day changes, that even emphasizes it more. And of course, we've already gotten quite a bit of people saying, well, I don't really like the low vis versions or the dark versions of certain existing maps, but
Have you all ever played on Monument? I'm sure Ancient Demise has, but Monument Valley nighttime version.
Oh God, yeah, there was a few Chaos March maps that we did, and yeah, it's pitch black. It's crazy.
You have to find your enemy enemies by looking for the glow of their weapons.
Well, you can use yeah. That's what I had in mind. PPCs would rule that map.
I should put that back in rotation and see how many people can
do it.
I am risking to break again the topic, but I would regarding mapping, I would like to thank Rick for hosting the release maps and for hosting some of the other files, like for instance that one time when we had no working editor. I think it was 0.10.1 release that he hosted for us kindly, and also Rick, you are one of the pillars of this community, and I just want to tell you we appreciate it very much.
Well, thank you very much, and I think we're all part of the community, and we're all trying to add our areas of influence as much as possible to make this game always get a little bit better.
Yeah, a little more enjoyable.
Yeah.
Also, I would like to thank Sabrist for the DPS calculations and for solving finally that topic. We stumbled so much over it for so long.
Okay.
I use those the calculations, the weapon readouts, like the damage per second and stuff, sometimes to compare and contrast variants and different loadouts for mechs, and sometimes to convince people to, like Invictus, for example, to actually accept it into the game. So there are a few out there that exist because I was able to draw a compelling argument from those bits of data.
It is still ongoing effort, but Sabrist helped a lot in that regard.
So with Extremity, one thing I was going to say about the low light conditions there is I actually have a really, really good technique for being able to see really well on that map, and I don't even have to use night vision or anything.
Well, what is it?
DirectX 9.
Ah, I haven't even checked how it looks with that.
The game looks a lot worse with DirectX 9, but I'm always playing on my awful laptops, so it makes sense that I would run it in DirectX 9 anyway. Let's see. What else?
That's actually, I could tell you about how difficult it is to make the lighting to be exactly the same for everyone. Someone always tells you that it's too dark, or someone tells it's too light, but because of the settings, different settings and setups people have, the lighting will differ very much.
Thanks to Sabrist, I also have bound the HDR toggle on a K, F9, F8, I think, and since then I also have a great success in discovering enemies.
Okay, yeah, that's helpful on some maps.
I'm just glad that we can't turn off clouds, because that, I remember that was the inspiration to keep clouds on all the time came from Ring of Fire.
Personal nerf.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, yeah, going to the whole DX 9 versus 10 and such, whatever works best for the player is obviously the most important thing. What is the most stable? In general, the best way to see the map how it was intended to be seen is to neutralize or set your gamma brightness and contrast settings in Crysis to the default settings. The minute you start playing with those settings will drastically or potentially drastically affect the look and the feel of the map. And sometimes if you set it the wrong way, it becomes, let's say, low vis maps become almost unplayable because you can't see anything, especially during night, or some other maps that have a very bright setting,
like Snowblind.
Blinded. Yeah, exactly. Your viewport will be almost completely blinded, and you won't be able to see any real features. So it's quite important to set that to the default settings if possible. And if you want to adjust it, it's best if you actually adjust your monitor to the proper settings, and that you don't have any, that your contrast is not set too high or your brightness is not set too low, to properly see what should be seen.
Any of you all have any last comments?
Yeah, did you cover the two questions? Features map players like the most and features are hardest. You did the hardest to deal with, right? So what features map players like most, do you think?
Oh yeah. So what map features do you think the players of Living Legends like the most?
Sand.
Yep.
I would like
trees.
to point out
They like buildings too, though.
the debug gun is also very well received. While there are plenty complaining, I still see plenty of using them.
Which gun?
Debug gun.
What does it do actually? I've never tried.
Just play Scorched and get in one dropship and find it out.
Yeah, it gives some info for everyone who's playing the.
Every texture you point at shows the file name.
Yeah.
Okay.
And people think that their system has been hacked, and generally, some people will overreact and then say that their system or the server has been hacked.
It's only 2020. It is expected to overreact.
Let's not encourage that, and hopefully we can get that that removed, because it does cause some.
That was never intended to reach the release, but it slipped through.
Yeah, that's all right.
I got hacked by Living Legends.
So, Sand, debug gun. What other features do you think players like the most?
Clear sight lines.
Yeah, long sidelines.
I think the ideal map is an open sandy field.
Which is called in the same
Death
time.
Valley? Who said Death Valley?
Well, the nice thing about Death Valley, even though it's open, the approaches that you can take going from one base to the other can vary, and it doesn't necessarily bottleneck in one area very easily.
Yeah, if you take a brawler, odds are good that you might be able to get from post to post without having to deal with long-range weapons, as long as you're careful and select the right route. And that's why when I use LRMs on that map, I typically use them on a fast asset or one that can do 360 torso, like the PPC ACM avatar. Yeah.
There is one thing we didn't cover, perhaps enough. Maybe it is enough as a topic for some next show like this podcast. It happens more often than not that one sole mapper that creates one map cannot carry through to finish it to the full finished level of features and game flow. Perhaps the handing over of the maps while still in the process of creation could be discussed some more, perhaps in some other podcast.
Yeah, it would be nice to have some sort of a repository for maps that are in progress as both a backup, so you don't lose your progress, but also a backup for the purpose of someone else to pick up your project. Yeah, that'd be great.
You mean for the sort of the community? Because
yeah.
Yes, the community, because the official maps somehow get the attention they need, but the community maps often both lose sources because there is no repository in the open, and often lose interest because the mapper somehow just loses free time or interest, but the map deserves further development, yet never receives any.
You know what the solution is, though? Join the team.
because in the old days, then when community mapping was a bigger thing and more frequent, and more people did it, then they never really shared the source file. This is why we don't have anything for Arbor Jungle and Ring of Fire, etc. So we lost so many because it was never a thing to share your Crysis files actually.
The recommended method with versioning control, SVN or whatever, could or maybe should be somewhat easier to implement and to solve this issue.
As Ancient mentioned, join the team and there you have it.
I might consider that in the end.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming, Ancient Demise, Fire Hound, Ivaan, Rick, Hunter, Sabrist. It's a pleasure having you.
Thank you so much for the interview.
Thank you.
Likewise.
Thanks very much.
This has been Returning to Base, a Mechwarrior Living Legends podcast, and as always, a shout out to Timothy Seals for our intro music and Shivoxy for our outro music. See you next time.